Cheers guys, I'm the Tech Prepper, hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to kick off a new series on gear, specifically how I select my gear. So everybody's gear needs are different, but we're going to get into what my requirements dictate and what influences my decision on how I operate. So for today, we're going to take a look at the Panasonic FZ-M1, and yes, this is discontinued. If that bothers you, we'll catch you on the next one. Before we get going with this series, I think it's important to establish what my personal requirements are, because the communication gear or the gear you select in general is going to be very specific to your operating needs. Now, first of all, I am a trail runner, hiker, and backpacker, and I enjoy taking my gear out, specifically my communications gear, out in the field to train. I think it's a great test bed to actually test for off-grid scenarios, which I'm in this game for emergency preparedness and emergency communication. That is it. Doing those activities, I tend to sweat and subject my equipment to a lot of salt and moisture. In fact, I have ruined probably about 3 Raspberry Pis over the last 3 years just to moisture alone, a couple of Baofeng UV5Rs, and even one Yaesu FT60. So my needs are influenced by having adequate ingress protection to protect my hardware. All right, so we're going to take a look at the Panasonic FZ-M1. This is a ruggedized tablet that is now discontinued. It's a 7.1-inch tablet, has a Core i5 processor. This unit has 16 gigabytes of RAM and a 128 gigabyte SSD drive. Now, the big question is, where does this fit into my communications plan? Well, to answer that question, we need to start really quickly from the beginning. So like most amateur radio operators, when I got into this game, the amateur radio scene was hot on the Raspberry Pi 3B pluses. At that time, about 3 years ago, these were about 30 bucks, and they've gone up in price, I think close to $100 if you could even find them. And I found that there were a lot of failure points with the Raspberry Pi. No adequate ingress protection, so very easy to get dust, dirt, and moisture into these units. And a common failure point for me was the SD cards. Not to mention that you have ports all around it. So when you connect your equipment, you have an octopus really as the hub of your equipment station. I did like that it was 5 watts and easy to field charge, low power consumption, but that was not enough for me to rely on this as a communications device for sending text messages, email, station-to-station messages, and things of that nature. About 18 months ago, I transitioned to the Panasonic CF20 Toughbook. I absolutely love this thing. This thing has been with me at least 50 to 60, 70 times out in the field and continues to keep on ticking. The nice thing about the CF20, as I've talked about in the past, is that this is a convertible notebook. I can go from tablet to full laptop and have a full-size keyboard. It also has adequate ingress protection for the work I do out here in the Sonoran Desert. Problem with this is, even if I detach the tablet portion and run around with a 2-pound system, it's still a bit large and competes for space in my ruck for my support gear. So a follower on Instagram met up with me at an event in January this year, and he had one of these FZ-M1 Toughpads, and I wasn't sure about the size. I wasn't sure whether it would be a good fit for me. Turns out it is. I'm still evaluating it. I'm about 3 months in, and I want to share with you all I know about this right now, how it's working out, and why I'm actually going to be introducing this into my kit. All right, folks, so we need to draw a 2A analogy. So if you're sensitive to 2A topics, this channel is probably not for you. I'm a firm believer in Second Amendment rights, but I feel that the analogies I draw from the firearm community translate well to other areas like communications. I have received a lot of criticism over the years on why I carry a Glock G43. And the reason is pretty simple. It is the pistol that I always have with me because it is a subcompact, but it's also large enough where I'm able to manipulate the firearm and get shots on target very quickly. I do prefer a larger Glock 17, and I do carry that when I go an open carry out in the Tonto National Forest. So the analogy really is quite simple. I can't always carry the Panasonic CF20. While it's a 4-pound notebook and I don't mind weight, it is a bit large. Now, the FZ-M1 is more like my G43. It's more of an everyday carry system, so I can always have this with me. And that is the primary reason why I looked at it. It appealed to me that I can literally put this in my man purse, man bag, whatever you guys want to call it, and have it with me every day. In fact, I even pair this with my HT, whether it's a Baofeng, which I don't run much these days, but my VX6R, and I can do a lot of digital mode communication with those two systems. So in my mind, just like firearms, what is the best digital comms platform? Well, it's the one you have with you. Before we get into some pros and cons, let's talk about how I plan to use this, because that's the most important part. Why select a piece of gear if you don't have an intended application? Well, I plan to interface this with my radios, specifically my 3 man packs, my Yaesu FT818 ND, 857D, and the Shack rig behind me, which is the FT897D. I also plan to interface it with my HT, which these days is the Yaesu VX6R. Now I plan to pair it with my custom OS, which is called MCOM Tools OS, but that's not a hard requirement. But I do plan on running WinLink, Pat WinLink in particular, and using that to send email on VHF, UHF, as well as HF. I also plan to do some keyboard to keyboard conversations using FL Digi and FL Message, also for collecting intelligence reports. I've got a bunch of other stuff I plan to do, but high level, this is primarily for me to connect a radio to it to do off-grid communication using RF only. So let's jump into some pros and cons, because I think that's also very important, because there is a compromise with anything. I mean, otherwise everybody would be running a 7.1-inch tablet. Let's jump into some pros and cons here, and there are quite a few. So the first reason why I selected this unit is its size, weight, and footprint. My unit comes in at just under 1.5 pounds, and it's a 7.1-inch tablet. So the ability for me to take this just about anywhere is one of the main reasons. Number 2 is the rugged construction. Like I told you, I personally have experienced failures with my field gear. I know that not everybody does, not everybody subjects their gear to my environment, but it is a personal issue for me. So the fact that this has an IP65 rating, it has mil standard 810 specification is what I'm looking for. The IP65 rating is interesting. I wish it had a 6 or a 7, but it will allow up to a direct nozzle blast of water, so this is good in the rain. In fact, I did test that the other day and shared it on an Instagram short, and the system is still running after wiping everything down. Now, the battery life on this thing is absolutely amazing. It completely knocks out the battery life when compared to my CF20. All my units have the extended battery. It does protrude a little bit here, but even though these are used batteries, I have no idea what type of maintenance they've undergone, how long they've been in service. I have some batteries where I'm actually getting a true 11 hours on a single charge. Now they do have standard batteries, which I have no experience with. I did find a source that I'm not going to reveal. They've already been gobbled up by the members on Buy Me a Coffee. You guys rock. But it's roughly half the capacity, but they're new batteries. So I'll let you guys know how the standard batteries work when they're brand new compared to these unknown extended batteries. For what I do out in the field, since I try to hit targeted combo windows, it's not a big deal because I boot up, connect my machine or my radio, make my contact and break down. So not a big issue. On that note, let me grab this unit. And we're gonna kind of skip here. So I've got a running copy of MCOM Tools OS. It's basically Ubuntu. We've got the extended battery here. Depending on which model you get, this has a bridge battery. So in the field, we'll take out this battery. It's still running, if you can see it. And I think you have about 30 seconds and you can pop in a new battery and we are good to go. So the ability for me to take a second battery, hot swap it, and not impact what I'm doing and have to do a restart is an absolute game changer. This thing was extremely well thought out for duty use. Another pro, like I said, I am a trail runner, hiker, and backpacker, and I run with basically my shooting gloves. This device works with gloved hands, works with the stylus, works with your finger, works with a keyboard, and works with a mouse when you attach it. So lots of different ways to get your data in and out of your machine. So let's talk about price. This can either be a pro or a con, depending on when you guys watch this video. I was fortunate that nobody really knew or cared about these old devices. A couple months ago, I bought 13 of these for about $110 a pop. Most of the guys on Buy Me a Coffee were able to do the same thing. So I try to tell them when I find quantities available. Right now, they are trending upwards of like $300. There are refurbished manufacturers that are asking more to 400, 500, and even 600. So for me, the price at when I purchased this before people found out about it was great at about 110 bucks. In fact, you can't even part it out because a used battery is about 80 bucks. A new one's about 300. So I have more batteries or more money in batteries than what I actually paid for the actual unit. One of my requirements is using this outdoors, and it's not perfect, but this unit in terms of the brightness comes in at 500 nit. It has to do with determining the brightness of a screen. For outdoor televisions, you should have a nit value of 700. I will tell you that if I find a spot that's just a little bit shaded, not much, it is very usable out in the sun, especially out here in the Sonoran Desert. All right, guys, this video is getting a bit long. Let's run through the cons real quick. So number one, this is somewhat sluggish compared to the CF20. In fact, the CF20 is sluggish compared to modern equipment. But bottom line is, it works pretty well with the amateur radio software so long as you're running one or two applications at a time. This is not a gaming platform by any means, so that's my biggest criticism. I would love to see a faster processor, but at the same time, this is fanless, it is quiet, and it runs pretty much forever based on my needs. Number two, this is discontinued. I don't know what my problem is. I have an unhealthy addiction to discontinued products. All my radios are discontinued. The last one that currently I'm running right now, which is the VX6 HT, I'm pretty sure that one's gonna be go the way of the dodo. Price of accessories can be excessive. Like I said, I paid $110 each for these units, and recently I have bought a handful of used batteries at a price point of about $80 a pop. So they will vary. Also, when you get into the dock, which I'll show in a second, and a few other accessories, you actually start to spend almost more money in accessories than the tablet. Again, I've got mine. My members on Buy Me a Coffee have theirs, but I just want to put it out there that the accessories can be quite steep. Built-in barcode reader. So I have a feeling that when Panasonic came out with this, they were aggressively marketing warehouses, because I have rarely found any units available on eBay or on the secondary market that don't have the barcode reader. I really don't like it. They actually have other modules that are kind of cool. My preference would be to remove this and then put the plates. Again, accessories are very expensive. For me to convert this and buy the 3 part numbers that are required to change this out would be much more expensive than I paid for the whole unit. So I'm just gonna deal with the barcode scanner. Big issue when it comes to amateur radio. This unit only has one USB-C port. And this is part of the reason why the communications platform I'm working on, I'm really trying to force using a single USB. So when paired with the DigiRig Mobile, where we get cat control and sound via one USB, perfect. So we may be out of luck in terms of GPS because of this one unit. So that's my big complaint. I have some workarounds for it. They're not great. We'll talk about those accessories in a minute. Screen brightness, like I said, 500 nit. Seems to work okay. It's not perfect. So I'm looking at it at just being on the cusp of either being in the pro category or the con category. Oh, application size. And this is, I guess it's a con here. The screen size is fairly small. And I have been developing my MCOM Tools OS project now for a couple years. And I have been primarily focused on the largest screen that I get from the CF20. And I've had to make adjustments to support a smaller screen, which is not a bad thing. So the size of my pad, or the pad of my finger, is important. So when I click on the buttons, I need to make sure that it's large enough for me to be able to hit the button I actually want to hit and nothing else. So I'm finding that, especially in the amateur radio space, the applications are not designed for manual entry unless you're dealing with applications that were designed on a smartphone to begin with. But I'm changing that because I am rewriting a front end that allows me to use traditional amateur radio software. I'm not going to get into all of those bits, but allow me to manipulate it using my hands, which is fantastic, whether gloved, without gloves, or with the stylus. Big issue with this too, sort of related, is the fact that it's very difficult to use this out of the box without a keyboard. The on-screen keyboard is okay, but at least under Linux, the on-screen keyboard does not allow you to do multiple key presses at the same time, like holding down Shift and sending another key signal. You don't have like the tab key, for example. A lot of really annoying features. more to the point why I am working on addressing those with my application front end to avoid the use of the keyboard where possible. So anyways, let's get into some accessories. Again, this is to complement it. I'm not planning on taking those into the field for the most part. They're more for when I transition back to the house. All right, so when I transition to the house, I want to actually be able to still use the same equipment, but be able to manipulate it a little bit easier. So while this may look a little bit ridiculous, I'm actually running the Panasonic FZ-M1 dock. I do have a small mechanical keyboard. This is a 68 key keyboard. I bought this a couple years ago. I love how quickly it is for me to enter in the information. It has a couple of USB ports on the back, which is also a problem, but I will also talk about how to fix that solution. So the dock is pretty nice. It actually has charging indicators on the front, easy to remove. And one thing I like is that it also has a cradle on the back for charging a second battery. So when you plug this into your mains, you're able to charge not only your CF or FZ-M1, but also able to charge a second battery. On the back here, don't know if it's going to come on camera. I don't have time for editing these days. 2 USB ports, 1 RJ45 for Ethernet, HDMI, VGA, and serial interface. So perfect for the ham community. So highly recommend the dock if you guys can find them at a good price. Again, these are probably going to be about 300 bucks. I picked mine up for 100. Again, before I started talking about it, the eBay sellers were unloading this stuff like it was candy. I probably should have led with this, but the absolute minimum piece of accessory you should have with you is a stylus. This is actually old new stock of the original Panasonic stylus, and it has a very fine point, which is really easy for manipulating that screen. I'll put a link down on the Amazon store of where I got them. Hopefully they're still around. Now, one thing I do recommend that everybody carry with them, and I'll put a link to this one as well, is a 4-port USB hub. So even if you don't have the dock, you're able to use that single USB port and have 4 more ports presented. So in my case, I'll have the USB to install my operating system, my keyboard, my mouse, and I'll have a free USB port. Now I have 2 power adapters. The first is an AC adapter. So this can either be plugged directly into the Toughpad or into the cradle. One change I did make, I forget what type of cable this is, but it uses a C25 connector, or they call it like the Mickey Mouse connector. I went with just an 18-inch section because I don't like having a whole lot of cable around. I also bought these ones on Amazon. Now for maximum portability, I have a 12 volt to 16 volt DC converter that uses a cigarette style plug. So I can charge this now in my car. I've also shown it before on this channel where I have a cigarette female adapter to Anderson power pole that then I can use to charge directly off of my field 12 volt batteries. I bought 3 of these, one to go into the Faraday bag. We're gonna do a video on that stuff. One to go in the car, and then for the field, I'm gonna cut this wire in half, and I'm actually gonna go and attach Anderson power pole cables. So I'll have a very small lead to field charge this using my existing equipment. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this gear series. A big shout out to the guys on Buy Me a Coffee. You guys are amazing. If you guys wanna see me develop all of these comms gear, do this full time, please consider supporting me. I have a private Discord server. I do give all of my field manuals, field cards to those guys. They get access to all of my gear that I produce. I'm only able to make small quantities of my TTP man packs. Those guys, based on their tier, will get access to buy those first. All right, guys, be strong, be safe, and be prepared.